Hi, y'all, it's Angela. Welcome back, and it's great to see you all again. I'm here to do a little mid year check in, and I thought the best way to summarize the reading from the first half of the year would be through the mid year book Freakout tag, though how much freaking out we'll actually be doing might be up for debate. So I'll have the questions linked in the description. Please let me know some of your answers to these questions, some of your best, your worst, your standouts, your unexpecteds, and let's get into the tag. First, I want to talk about some of the best books that I read in 2022. I set out this year to read a lot more for quality than quantity, so there were actually quite a few 5 stars, but I did have some standouts that even to this day, middle of the year, I still think back to. One of those books is The Maid by Nina Prose. This book has been absolutely everywhere, and in my opinion, for good reason. This book follows a maid who works at a hotel, and one day she discovers a man dead in his room, and the police have her as their number one suspect. So she has to solve the crime of the murder and figure out who actually did it. This was one of my first introductions to the cozy mystery genre, the other one being Arsenic and Adobo, but I absolutely loved this book. I loved hearing the character's voice and seeing things from her point of view. It does get a little dark, which is a bit unexpected, so please check the trigger warnings document in my description if you're interested in this book. Another book I loved was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, and this is a memoir about the author's experience with domestic violence in a queer relationship, and it also covers domestic violence in the LGBTQ plus community as a whole. I really like the way the author told the story, how she used metaphors and these little vignettes to paint this bigger picture of her experiences as well as how they tie into other domestic violence relationships. Another unexpected kind of pleasant surprise was Razorblade Tears by S.A. Crosby. This follows two fathers whose sons were married but also murdered, and so they set out on this quest like mission to find out who murdered their sons and also to get revenge. This book has that voice and perspective of what you might expect from like a 40-year-old dad, which I think makes it an interesting way to address topics like homophobia and racism. Those are topics that come up a lot in this book, and while it feels a little cheesy, I kind of loved it. I don't know why. I devoured it on an airplane ride, and it was just one of the most gripping and compelling books that I've read so far. And lastly, I have to slip a romance book in here. I read The Lilac Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake, and this was probably one of my favorite romances that I read this year that it wasn't even on my anticipated list or my radar or anything like that. This book follows Lilac Green, who goes back to her small hometown to reluctantly act as the wedding photographer for her stepsister. While she's there, she rekindles this crush relationship with her stepsister's best friend, and she finds an unexpected romance in there. This book is fun. It has a really like sexy romance tension relationship between the two main characters, and I think it also does the perfect balance between a romance plot point as well as a family like sister relationship plot point. Let's move on to the best sequel that I read. I usually don't read a lot of series anymore, and the series that I do read are usually standalones. For example, I read the entire Written in the Stars series. Each of those can be a standalone. And I also read the Finley Donovan series. Those can't really be a standalone, but they're all really like fun books and they're new books. But I think the best sequel that I read was a reread, and it was White Hot by Alona Andrews. This is part of the Hidden Legacy series, and this is part of the first original trilogy. It's an urban fantasy following the main character, Nevada. She runs this family-owned investigative agency who has been taking on a few kind of big shot cases, ones that are a little bit outside their pay grade, to be honest, and so she gets herself involved in a lot of these magical societies and systems, but she also ends up gaining a friend, or he starts off as a frenemy in Mad Rogan, who is this really powerful guy in the society. And so this is the second book. This is my favorite, even after the reread. This is the one that I remember the most. This is the one that has the most development in terms of the magical plot as well as their romantic relationship. And so I love the series as a whole, but this one has this really special place in my heart. Next question is, what are some new releases that I haven't read yet? This year is one of the first years that I've made a 2022 anticipated list, so I ahead of time scouted out all the books that I've been wanting to read, and I think I'm gonna keep doing that from now on. It's put on my radar a lot of books by authors that I've loved once and would love to try again. Let's start with kind of an author that I read from before and that I was really anticipating this book from, and it's To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. This is a book told from 3 different time periods following the same couple. They're basically 2 people with the same names in 3 different time periods. It's kind of this saga that like spans over time. It's got a little bit of like historical fiction, but also dystopian and a little bit of that futuristic kind of sci-fi. I haven't looked too much into the reviews for this because I don't want to get spoiled, but I'm really excited to crack into this one. It's really hefty. I'm kind of scared. Another book by an author I've read before is the Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I read The Sundown Motel from her before, and while it wasn't everything that I wanted from a mystery suspense, that little supernatural twist really got me, and I loved her writing style and the way she paints a setting and characters. I don't know much about the Book of Cold Cases, to be quite honest, and I want to go into it surprised, but this is definitely on my radar. The last new release that I've been really anticipating is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This book is about a mother who, after passing, leaves her Caribbean black cake recipe for her 2 children who I think don't have quite a good relationship. And this book is about these 2 children rebuilding their relationship, rebuilding their family history. The next question is, what are some of my most anticipated releases in the second half of the year? And the first one has to be Babel by R.F. Kuang. Has a really long name. Babel, or The Necessity of Violence and Arcane History of Oxford. And that one. It's the next book that R.F. Kuang has released after the Poppy Wars series, and I have no idea really what it's about even. I think it's dark academia, which does scare me a little bit. I haven't traditionally had great experiences with dark academia, and I've actually sworn off dark academia for the most part, but this one seems like it has a combination of that academic setting as well as history as well as war. I think that'll be a really interesting take for her to tackle. I have no idea where it's gonna go, but I'm excited to get into that one. I'm also quite a bit of a Ruth Ware fangirl. I think I've read almost all her books at this point, and in the next few months she's going to be releasing The It Girl. I think this book follows the trope of a group of friends get really close in school, one of them gets murdered, and they all kind of separate, but then decades later they come back and something draws them back to the original murder as well as a current day murder, probably something like that. Next question is, what are some of my biggest surprises from the first half of the year? And I have both good and bad surprises, so I'll start with the good. This was a book that I didn't have a lot of high expectations going into it. I only picked it up because everybody was talking about it, and it was Finley Donovan is Killing It, and surprisingly I really liked it. I think there's something really fun and personable about Finley Donovan as a character. She makes so many dumb decisions, but she's just so entertaining to listen to and to follow. And so this follows Finley Donovan, who is a writer, recently went through a divorce, and she gets accidentally hired to be a hired killer for this really rich lady, and she decides that she needs the money enough to actually go through with it. This book was really fun. If you're looking for a beach read but that has like a darker twist, I would really recommend this one. This tackles dark topics, but it is quite light in a sense, and it's really fun and casual. So would recommend it for that. I also did unfortunately have a few bad surprises. There were a few books that I was really anticipating and they just did not work for me at all. One of them is The Roughest Draft. This is a romance about two authors who had a falling out, but they're contractually obligated to write another book together. So they decide to check up in this remote Florida home to finish everything and basically rediscover, rework through whatever broke them up and rekindle their romance. I think that while this book was really well written, it had these amazing, tense scenes between the two characters. There was an element to the book that I personally hate. I just cannot stand as the basis of a romantic relationship in a book. And so that really ruined the story for me. And I think that in the end, I just remember the two as being really pretentious pricks. The other book that was a bit of a bad surprise was Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This follows a main character who works as a meteorologist at her local news station, and she develops this romance with one of the sports broadcasters in this plot to set up their bosses together. I think I was only really anticipating this because Rachel Lynn Solomon's other book, The X Talk, was one of my favorite romances from 2021. Absolutely like top tier on my list. And this book, I think it was because there was just that lack of tension for me. I don't love friends to lovers. It ruins a lot of books for me. I'm sorry. But yeah, friends to lovers is not a trope that I like at all. And so with this one being more on that softer friends to lovers side, I think that it just didn't live up to my expectations of it. So it was still okay. The next question is, what are some of your new favorite authors? I generally, I don't, I don't really like calling authors some of my favorite authors until I've like literally read all their books. I don't know, that's a whole nother issue. Some authors that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on for their future releases are going to be Ashley Herring Blake, Nita Prose, S.A. Crosby, and also probably Alexandra Andrews, who wrote Who is Maud Dixon? That book, also one of my favorites that I read, and I just love the style. So these are some of the authors that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for. The next question is, who is your newest fictional crush? I was hoping to find this answer from one of the romances that I read, but all the romances I read this year have been a little lackluster, not gonna lie. So I'm just gonna say that my fictional crush is gonna be Scarlett from They Never Learned. Might be a bit dark for a fictional crush, but she is a resident girl boss. She's out there slay queening. The next question is a book that made me cry, and that has to be Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This follows a man who unexpectedly dies, and he gets sent to this way station in between life and the afterlife. While he's there, he has time to reflect on his life, his death, as well as develop a relationship with the guy that runs the way station. This book is just feel good in so many ways. It's also really reflective and a bit philosophical because it tackles the topics of death and the afterlife and what is the meaning of a life and relationships with people. It just hit me in all the spots, and I would recommend it a lot. Next question is a book that made me happy. And I think the first series I think of when I think of happy books is definitely the Heartstopper series. This year I read volume 4, which isn't necessarily the happiest volume of the bunch. I think it's actually one of the more serious, kind of intense books of the series. But as a whole, the book series is very, very feel good. It puts a smile on my face instantly. Something about the two characters, they're just so cute and so wholesome, and there's just so much good communication, humor, a sense of family, and like young love. That is just a very, very feel good type of series. The next question is, what are some of the most beautiful books that I've bought this year? I've just recently started getting into buying more books for my collection and really building it up. One of those books is The Cartographer by Pung Shepherd. This is, I mean, if you'll see, this is like a really lovely library of doors and just map related things. I love the design of this, and this is about a woman who gets into this argument with her father over maps. They're both cartographers, and it basically ruins their relationship. Her father really suddenly passes away and leaves behind this map that they were arguing over, and so she decides that she needs to go investigate into it, and it leads her into this fantastical world. I'm pretty sure this is in the fantasy genre, so I am so excited to read this and get into it, and also to have this on my shelf. Like, something about the design and the color palette is just really beautiful. And the final question is, what are some books that you still need to read by the end of the year? Now this list, this is the one that's a doozy. So the first one is the hardest to tackle, and that is I want to read all of my remaining book of the month, and that includes the remaining books of the month that I'll be getting in the rest of the year. So for now, that list includes The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, uh, The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. This was from a while back. This was January 2021, and I still have not read this. I also have The Blinds by Adam Sternberg. I read like 10% of this, and I really got into it, so I got a book of the month copy. And then we have Kaikei, I think, by Vaishnavi Patel, and this is another book that I got recently. And of course, Black Cake, The Cartographers. I also want to finish a series that I've read sporadically for the past 4 years now, and that's the Hidden Legacy series. So I mentioned White Hot, and the last two books I have to read in the series for now is Emerald Blaze. This is in the next part of this whole Hidden Legacy series, following Nevada's sister Catalina, and there is a new book called Ruby something that's going to be released this year, I think, too. So I want to finish the entire series. And I also desperately need to finish all my NetGalley arcs. Some of these books have been on my list for quite a few months. They were released starting in May, so I'll kind of go through some of these books that I have. My NetGalley arcs. The Evening Hero by Marie Myung Lee, City of Orange by David Yoon, The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentle, Where Darkness Blooms by Andrea Hanna, and Our Crooked Hearts by Melissa Albert. So that's quite an ambitious list for the rest of the year, but I'm really excited and hopefully get past this kind of reading slump that I've had in the past few months to really tackle all the rest of these books. Thank you so much for watching my tag. I'll be doing a wrap-up of all the books that I've read in the past few months coming very soon, so hopefully I'll see you around for that. If you want to find me on other places on the internet, I have my Instagram and Goodreads linked in the description, as well as the list of trigger warnings for all the books I talked about in today's video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.